Hello, welcome to another video. In this video I just want to give my thoughts on the twins, just in general. I've only read books on them and watched documentaries. I don't know them personally, but after reading quite a bit about them I have formed an opinion. I thought I would share that with you. I think with the twins, I think like a lot of us, their younger years was shaped out who they were in the future. That's an obvious point, isn't it? But I think one of the things that did affect them quite a bit, that's maybe not mentioned too much, is that the way they were treated by their cousin Billy Wiltshire. He was quite bad to them. He used to chuck bricks at them on bomb sites, amongst other things. Just general being really bad to them. I think Reg even said in his book that Billy was a bastard to them. Some of the things were quite bad. They could be classed as torture. He used to hold their heads under the water until they almost passed out and drowned. Just things like that. It's hard to imagine this type of thing not affecting you when you're young. And when that was happening to the twins, they were quite young. They were around 10 or 11. So I think that would have made quite a big impression on them. It's not an excuse for them, but I think maybe you can understand why the twins were so violent when they were older, especially Ronnie. He had a mental illness since a young age on top of that, so it's no wonder that he became very violent very often. I think Ronnie Kray, he loved being a gangster, he loved the status of being a gangster, he loved being feared. Reggie was more being a gangster for business purposes, where Ronnie just seemed to be more about the power side of it, being in control, causing people to be in fear of him, and really enjoying that aspect of it. I think that's why money was never really important to Ronnie as much as it was with Reggie. Reggie was more money motivated and valued having money more, where Ronnie, by all accounts, he would spend it as fast as he got it, or he would give it away. I think Ronnie was more generous in that sense. I think it's been said before that Reggie was quite tight with money. I think Reggie would like to have kept money aside and watched it build up, but I don't think Ronnie ever allowed that to happen because he just wanted to spend it as fast as he got it or give it away. I think Ronnie not being a gangster for the money like most gangsters would want to be, it kind of set him apart from everyone else. Fear and respect was top of his list, but at the same time I think Ronnie could get jealous over people who were getting what he would consider too much money. I think if he heard about it he wouldn't like it. I think Ronnie had this type of jealous personality. I just get that from him, and I think in his Broadmoor interview he was talking about McVitie. And one of the first things he mentioned about McVitie was that he never had no money. So that sort of tells me that while Ronnie didn't want to be a gangster for the money, and money didn't mean that much to him when he had it, I think that he still didn't like if people, or if he heard about people, were getting a bit more money than himself. I think this is what the hate towards the Richardsons was based on. I think it's they were just too successful. The twins done well for themselves with money. I don't think it was on the scale of the Richardsons though. The Richardsons had more frauds on the go, more long firms. They had the airport scam. Charlie was into mining in Africa. Eddie and Frank had the fruit machines. On top of that they probably had some clubs and they probably had some protection going on. I'm sure Ronnie would know what the Richardsons were getting and what they were involved in. I'm sure he would hear about it. The twins had their clubs and the frauds with Leslie Payne, their protection money, but I don't think it was on the scale of what the Richardsons were getting. And by the end of the 1960s, I think a lot of things had dried up for the twins. I know they had the bearer bonds thing going on with the mafia and that, but I think a lot of the frauds and that had gone. They were a lot worse off than they were in the mid to early 60s, which I would say was their peak. Moving on to the violent side of the twins, Reggie and Ronnie, they could both be very violent, but Reggie's was more controlled, I believe. Ronnie, I think, was at the mercy of his illness 99% of the time. That's why he could be a different person from one day to the next. It's tough living with any mental illness at any point in time, but I think back then it was not really looked on like it is today. There is more treatment available now. Back then they were still probably getting to grips with it and probably didn't fully understand it. I'm not sure what pills Ronnie was on. I think he was on Stemetil, but I'm not sure what else they had given him. But like I say, I don't think in the 1960s, it wasn't fully understood, his paranoid schizophrenia. So he was probably not on the right medications or the right dosage. Plus, he was drinking heavily, and you can't really be drinking with big heavy pills for an illness like that. It's just not going to work out for you. Like it's been said before, I think Reg was very dominated by Ronnie. This got progressively worse as the years rolled by. In the end, Ron was calling the shots on everything. Without Ron, I don't think Reg would have killed anybody, shot and stabbed people, give him a right-hander, but I don't think Reg would have actually killed people. It took him until the end of '67 to actually kill someone, and even then he was dominated by Ron, and he was in turmoil over his wife's death. So I think in better circumstances, I don't think Reg really would have been a killer. I think he would have took a leaf out of Billy Hill's book, where Billy Hill says that killing is a mug's game. You know, it's just not, just don't do it. Ron, on the other hand, I think it was only a matter of time before he killed somebody. The McCowan case where the twins were acquitted made him feel untouchable, and for a short time they actually were untouchable. The police weren't going near them, the press weren't going near them, but I think this was the catalyst for Ron going into a pub at 8:30 in the evening and killing George Cornell in full view of witnesses. Only somebody who's in the grips of madness would do that. Ron thought that nobody would testify and point the finger at him, and he was right for a while. Nobody did do that because there was that wall of silence going on, but it don't take away how brazen it was, and it was very reckless. I don't think killing Cornell was a planned thing. I do think it was on the spur of the moment. Some things Cornell did helped him into an early grave with Ron, like telling people he was a fat perf. Then you got to add to that he moved from the East End to South London and then joined up with the Richardsons. Then there was the Dickie Hart murder the night before. So I think all this played on Ron's mind that evening, and he just kind of snapped. And I don't know, it's hard to know what Ron was thinking that night when he done it, but I don't think any of those things warranted George Cornell being killed. I'm sure any sane person wouldn't have killed George Cornell for those reasons. I think one of the last things on George Cornell's mind that evening was that Ronnie Kray was going to come in and shoot him. Cornell often drank in the Blind Beggar. It's not like he was there brazenly, like taking the piss after what happened the night before at Mr. Smith's. He was in the Blind Beggar regular, and he visited someone in the hospital that day, and he just decided to pop into the Blind Beggar like he probably normally would if he was in the area. He could have maybe skipped it, maybe waited till the next week, but he wasn't involved in the Dickie Hart murder, so I don't think he felt there was any risk being in the East End the day after or drinking in the Blind Beggar. I don't believe Cornell was a threat to Ron's life, like Ron says in his later life, in his interview in Broadmoor. I see no reason why Cornell would want to kill Ron, and most villains in the 60s, they would want to avoid killing. That killing's a last resort. They want to be making money and be a success. They don't want killing spoiling that. So I really don't think George Cornell had any intentions to do any harm to Ron. I think Ron just says that just to justify killing George. Like I say, most villains in those days, they wouldn't go around killing because they want to be making money and be a success. But making money and being a success wasn't top of Ron's agenda. It was being known and feared, and what better way to be known and feared than to kill a man. Reggie killing Jack McVitie, that was just as senseless as the George Cornell murder. Reg was totally dominated by Ron at this point, and after Francis had died, Ron was really all that he had left. But really, Ron was the last thing that Reg needed at that point. He had his mum and dad and Charlie, but I think he fell back on Ron in those hard times for comfort. But Ron wouldn't have been much comfort. The man was seriously mentally ill and very homicidal and just felt untouchable. By this stage, Ron was completely out of control. His bout of madness was controlling his decisions. By all accounts, Reggie Kray gave up on life at this point. And like Cornell, I don't believe Jack McVitie was a threat to the twins' life, like it said. It said that he carried a shotgun around and he threatened the firm. He might have carried a shotgun around, but he had his hands bashed up with a crowbar and stuff like that. He had people after him, he had his enemies, but I don't think he was any threat to the twins or the firm. He was drinking with Tony Lambriano the night he died, and Tony Lambriano was a member of the firm, so I just don't understand it. I can't see Jack McVitie being a threat to the twins. Jack McVitie was a bit of a joker by all accounts, but he was a bit of a nuisance, bit of a loose cannon, heavy drinking, taking pills, but I don't think he'd done anything to warrant being killed. You gotta remember that Jack McVitie was getting recruited by the twins, even after ripping them off of money and some drugs and merchandise and all sorts. He was still being let back into the firm, still being offered work. I think Jack McVitie was brought into the firm to do a lot of jobs because 90% of the firm, in my opinion, they just want up to the job. Like John Pearson said in one of his books, they just seem like a rabble, and I think that's especially for later years with the twins, like 67 onwards. Ronnie Kray at his trial said there was no firm, they were just drinking friends. And why it wasn't true that day in court, in the sense that Ronnie meant it, in real life it was true, they were just drinking friends. I don't think a lot of the firm were up to scratch, you know. I can't recall anything in books about Tony Lambriano being violent, or Connie Whitehead, or the Tills. There were heavyweights on the firm that could fight: Donahue, Ian Barry, big men like Pat Connolly and Tommy Brown. But to me the others just fall short of seeming like genuine hard men. To me it's no wonder they were calling on Jack McVitie to do jobs like killing Leslie Payne. He did fail to do that, and he did bottle it, but they still called on him to do it. Maybe it's because some of the other firm just weren't up to it. I think Jack McVitie is demonised a lot by the twins in their later years, and some members of the firm like Tony Lambriano. I think they demonise him to justify his killing, like in the film The Krays from 1990. It's got Jack portrayed as an older man and quite weak, and then it's got him chucking a woman out of a moving car. I don't believe that really happened, because nobody else really says about it apart from the twins in a book and then in the film. I think it would have been more common knowledge that Jack done that, and more people would have spoke about it. I think a lot of Jack's peers said that he was an alright bloke, you know, a bit of a nuisance, a bit of a drinker, but I don't think the majority, they don't have bad things to say about Jack McVitie. So I think a lot of the bad things that are said by the twins or Tony Lambriano, I think it is to demonise him and justify his killing. I will talk about the elephant in the room, and that's that the twins were paedophiles or child sex abusers or involved in child sex abuse. I gotta say that I don't believe it at the moment, because there isn't any evidence about it. They've been dead for years, nobody's come forward. Even Boothby has been dead since 1986, and nobody has come forward to say that he was a paedophile. I know there's a couple of websites that claim the twins were involved in this. I've read them, but they don't come up with no evidence, because nobody's come forward about this. But some people believe it. If anything did come to light that the twins were involved in this type of thing, then I would delete my channels and my videos without thinking twice, because nobody wants to make a video about paedophiles. But you know, there needs to be evidence, doesn't there? It's quite easy to call someone a paedophile just because they liked younger men. Ronnie did sleep with younger men below the age of consent in the 60s. That's a fact. But by today's standards, it would be quite okay. But you got to remember that gay sex was illegal until about 1967. But I don't believe that they are at this point, simply because nobody's come forward and there isn't no evidence to suggest that they were involved in child sex abuse. I think Reggie should have been released from prison in 1995 after Ronnie died. I don't think he should have been kept in after that. I think in 1995 he should have been slowly integrated back into the community, which would have been a difficult task because he's very famous by that stage, so it would have been difficult to integrate him back, but it wouldn't have been impossible. I think after the initial melee of press and that taking pictures of him out and about, I think it would have died down, and eventually I think he would have just been left alone. Reg wouldn't have returned to crime, I don't think. He was too old for that. He would have made some money legitimately. He probably would have got better help for his cancer, and he might have lived longer. I think Ronnie was a bit difficult to be released. Obviously he was mentally ill, but there's people with paranoid schizophrenia in the community and doing well, so it's a bit of a tough one. I don't know. I don't think if Ronnie would have lived longer, he wouldn't have been released, I don't think. But Reggie wasn't really released, only on compassionate grounds, but I do think that Reggie should have been integrated back into society after Ronnie died. Yeah, and that's about it really. There's no revelations in my thoughts. It's probably the same thoughts as everybody else has about the twins. It's not a great video. I'm not really good at these videos, you know. I'm not really a natural talker over these videos. That's why I've mainly done pictures and music. This really ain't my thing, and I'm out of my comfort zone doing this. But I thought videos like this would make a change. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about in the future, you're welcome to say in the comments, and I'll try my best to put something together. But I hope you've enjoyed this video anyway, of me rambling on, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you.